Hello everybody, welcome to Chapter 6, Section 1. And in this chapter we're going to be talking about factoring polynomials. In the very first place we always start when it comes to factoring polynomials is to talk about common monomial factors of a polynomial. And to handle the factoring of polynomials we use the distributive property, the most basic form of which is shown here in red. A times B plus A times C is equal to A times the quantity B plus C, sort of the reverse statement of the way you might have learned it earlier. So let's talk about that. The very first job we have is finding common factors here. And so let's talk about it. If we look at the two factors here, we've got 10y squared and 15y cubed z. What would be the common factor? Well, certainly 10 and 15 share common factors of 5. Right? We've got 5 times 2 times y squared for this first term. And we have 15, which is 5 times 3 times y cubed. Now the other thing to note is that y cubed actually contains the factor y squared as part of it, because y squared times y to the first is equal to y to the third. So we can actually see that there are now two common factors right here, 5 and y squared contained in both. And so when we factor these out, we'd say, well, the common factor then is going to be 5 times y squared. And we see that that's contained within both of these terms. All right, how about our next victim over here? We've got 4x to the 6th y. We've got 18x squared y. Let's look at the numbers first. If we're looking for our common factor here, well, both of them contain a factor of 2, right? We've got 2 times 2 here. We've got 2 times 9 here. So 2 must be part of the common factor. What else? Well, x to the 6th contains a factor of x to the 2nd, so x squared must also be part of the common factor, right? X to the 6th, remember, would be the same thing as x to the 2nd times x to the 4th. And we'll note that y is contained within y to the 6th, so y must also be part of that common factor. And so there you have it, 2x squared y. So the next part of this is let's talk about factoring out a common monomial factor. Now, when we were multiplying, we would have done the following. If we took 3x times x minus 5, when we multiplied 3x into the parentheses, we would have distributed the 3x times x to get 3x squared and the 3x times 5 to get 15x. In factoring, we reverse that process. In factoring, we're looking for the common factor among the terms and then using the polynomial distributive factor property to factor it out. So in this case, we note that 3x is the common factor among 3x squared minus 15x, and so we would rewrite it as 3x times the quantity, x minus 5. So that's our first job. Let's talk about factoring each of the following by using the distributive property. So let's look at 12m squared plus 6m and 18. We note that 12 contains a factor of 6. This is 6 times 2 times m squared. 6m contains a factor of 6. This is 6 times m. And 18 contains a factor of 6 as 6 times 3. Since each of the terms does not contain an m, we cannot factor out m. Even though it's contained in the first two terms, it's not contained in the last. So the only common factor here would be 6. And so by our common factoring, our distributive property, we take 6 times the quantity 2m squared minus, well, 6 times m just becomes 1m when we factor it away. Sorry, that would be plus. Let me make that straight. Minus 6 times 3 becomes just 3. And we think, all right, 6 would have to be multiplied by 2 to give us 12m squared. 6 would have to be multiplied by m to give us 6m. And 6 times 3 would give us 18. All right, the second one over here, maybe looks a little bit more complex, but not so far off of the what we were just looking at. We just have to go through and make sure that we identify the common factors. So it looks like if we deal with our numbers, that 6, 9, and 12 will all share a 3 as part of that common factor. Now we have x to the fourth, x to the third, and x to the second. Well, the first two terms each contain a factor of x to the second. X to the second times x to the second gives us x to the fourth, and x to the second times x gives us x cubed. So x squared must be part of our common factor. And finally, y squared and y to the fourth all share y squared as a common factor. So y squared has to be part of that common factor. So here's what we do. Take 3x squared y squared, which we know is our common factor, and we ask, what would we have to multiply by 3x squared y squared to get 6x to the fourth y to the second? Well, the answer is 3 times 2 would give us 6, and x squared times x squared would give us x to the fourth. Y squared would just be multiplied by that term directly. We take the subtraction sign along with us here for the next term. We say, well, what would we have to multiply by 3x squared y squared to get 9x cubed y squared? In this case, that would have to be 3 to give us 3 times 3, 9. And x squared times x would give us x cubed. And again, y squared just stays by itself. Now for the last term, 3 times 4 gives us 12. X squared times, well, it's 1 would give us x squared. Y squared times y squared would give us y to the fourth, and that would be our factored form using the distributive property. Okay, more coming up in the next video.